Hey, have you heard about this slightly surprising thing happening over in Japan? It seems there's a noticeable trend, maybe more than you'd think, of foreigners getting Japanese driver's licenses.
Yeah, particularly Chinese nationals, it seems.
Right, and the really interesting part, they're apparently using hotel addresses to do it. Kind of makes you go, huh, how does that work?
It definitely does. It raises some questions. We've been digging into the sources on this, looking at the situation as of today, May 7th, 2025, trying to piece together the why and the how behind it all.
Exactly. So if you're listening and want to get a quick but, solid understanding of what's happening and maybe what it means down the line, you're in the right place.
Hmm.
Our mission today is really to unpack this. Why is it happening? What's the current state of play? And yeah, what could the future hold? Okay, so let's dive in. What's the absolute core of this trend? Lay it out for us.
Okay, so the fundamental things, you've got an increasing number of foreign nationals using a specific Japanese system. It's called the Foreign Driver's License Conversion.
Conversion, right?
And the, let's say, key detail here is that they're using hotel addresses as their official residence when they apply.
A hotel address for a driver's license.
Yep. And this system allows people with licenses from certain other countries to basically switch them over to a Japanese one. They just need to pass a test, which is, well, relatively simple.
Okay, but why bother? Why go through that process just to swap licenses? What's the big deal about having a Japanese one specifically?
Ah, well, that's the crux of it, really. It boils down to international recognition. How many other countries will actually accept your license? A Japanese license. It's got way broader acceptance internationally compared to, say, a Chinese one.
How much broader are we talking?
Significantly, Japan is part of the Geneva Convention on Road Traffic,
Okay.
which means a Japanese license is valid for driving in something like 100 member countries. Think places like Europe, the US, Canada, lots of places.
Wow, 100. Okay, that's huge. And a Chinese license.
Much more limited. China isn't part of that convention, so their licenses are only recognized in maybe about 10 countries or so.
Only 10. Okay, yeah, I can see the appeal now. That's a massive difference in driving freedom.
Exactly. That disparity seems to be the main motivation, especially for Chinese citizens. It suddenly makes driving possible in way more parts of the world.
Makes total sense. So that administrative hurdle suddenly seems, well, worth jumping over.
Mhm.
But how? How can they actually use a hotel address? That still feels like the sticking point. Isn't that usually tied to, where you actually live?
Normally, yes. For most people getting a license, you'd need what's called a juminyo, a resident card, which proves you live there long term. But Japan has this other provision. It's a specific document called a certificate of residence stay, or in Japanese, taisei shimeisho.
The certificate of residence stay. Okay, tell me about that. What is it for?
Think of it like this. The regular resident card is for, well, residents, people registered in the system. The certificate of residence stay, though, it's specifically designed for people not covered by that main registration system.
Like who?
Like short-term visitors on tourist visas, for example, or even Japanese nationals who live overseas but are just back in Japan temporarily. And crucially, they can get this certificate issued by their temporary accommodation.
Like a hotel.
Like a hotel, exactly.
And the authorities accept that hotel-issued certificate as proof of address for a driver's license application.
That's how the system currently works, yes. The certificate has their name, date of birth, the hotel's address, their planned length of stay, and it needs to be signed and stamped by the hotel manager. It's official proof of their temporary residence.
Huh. Is there actual evidence of this happening? People getting licenses this way?
Yeah, there was an FNN News report back in October 2024. It gave an example of someone, a resident of Beijing, who apparently managed to get a Japanese license. They reportedly used a hotel address after visiting Japan just twice on tourist visas.
Wow. Okay, so it's a real pathway people are using. It does make you wonder, though, could a Japanese citizen do this too? If I lost my license while traveling in Japan, could I just check into a hotel and use that address to get a replacement?
That's a good question, testing the symmetry. And yes, technically, a Japanese citizen can use the system too under certain conditions. If, for instance, they primarily reside overseas but are back in Japan for a while, they could use a hotel address and that certificate of residence to, say, renew their license or get it reissued.
Okay, so it's not exclusively a loophole for foreigners.
Correct. The mechanism exists for Japanese nationals temporarily in the country too.
But I guess it's probably pretty uncommon for a Japanese person who actually lives in Japan to use a hotel as their main address for their license, right? That'd be weird.
Exactly. If you're a resident of Japan, your license and your resident card are almost always tied to your actual home address. Registering your primary residence at a hotel just isn't standard practice. The system anticipates your registered address is where you live.
Right, gotcha. So let's circle back to the main group using the Chinese nationals. Besides driving in way more countries, what other specific perks come with having that Japanese license?
Well, there are a few practical advantages. Renting a car overseas becomes much, much easier. Rental agencies in those 100 or so Geneva Convention countries instantly recognize the Japanese license.
Less hassle at the rental counter. Makes sense.
Definitely. It can sometimes also function as a handy form of identification internationally. Maybe not primary ID everywhere, but it's often accepted.
Okay.
And arguably, going through the conversion process means they learn Japanese traffic rules. That could be beneficial if they plan to spend more time in Japan later, maybe for work or study.
And the test itself, is it super difficult? I feel like I read somewhere it wasn't.
You heard right. The conversion exams are generally considered quite manageable. The written test is typically just 10 true-false questions. You only need 7 correct to pass.
10 questions.
Yeah. And the practical driving test, while it checks basic skills, is often seen as less demanding than, say, getting your very first license in Japan.
So fairly accessible overall.
Relatively speaking, yeah.
Okay, so we have this system. It's being used. The motivations are clear. What's the official stance? Has the Japanese government said anything? Are they looking at changing this given the, hotel address aspect?
Well, as of our latest info, May 7th, 2025, there haven't been any major changes announced to the system itself. In fact, Sankei News reported back in February 2025 that the government stated it was, and I quote, not aware of any problems with using hotel addresses for these license conversions.
Not aware of any problems. Interesting.
Yeah, and they confirmed no system changes were implemented at that time. Meanwhile, the numbers keep going up. The overall number of foreign license conversions topped 66,000 back in 2023.
66,000, wow.
Mm-hmm.
But surely with numbers like that and people getting licenses based on potentially very short stays, aren't there concerns bubbling up?
Oh, absolutely. Concerns are definitely being voiced. You hear talk about a potential link to an increase in traffic accidents involving foreign drivers, though the data there can be complex.
Right.
But there are certainly worries being expressed about the safety side of things, and also just the fairness. Should someone staying short-term in a hotel be able to get a full license so easily? This is starting to spill over into public discussion, too, like on social media.
Oh, really? What are people saying online? Got any examples?
Yeah, we saw a couple of posts on X, formerly Twitter. One, actually from today, May 7th, mentioned a specific hotel in Sapporo. Apparently, this hotel is now refusing to let guests use its address for driver's license applications.
Refusing? Why?
They explicitly cited concerns about the system being potentially abused or misused. That's quite a direct reaction from a business.
Wow, yeah. Any others?
Another post from yesterday, May 6th, was more critical of the system itself. The user felt it was too lax, too easy. They were basically calling for stricter rules, like requiring everyone to submit a proper residence certificate, the Juminyo, instead of just allowing the hotel-issued certificate of stay.
Okay, so the public mood might be shifting, or at least there's a debate starting, even if the official stance is status quo for now.
Precisely. It's perfectly legal under the current rules, but the practice sits in this kind of gray area of intent versus outcome. It's clearly popped up because of how international driving rules work or don't work together, combined with this specific Japanese administrative procedure, the certificate of residence, stay.
Right.
The government says no problem for now, but the fact that it's being discussed in the media, on social platforms, by businesses, it suggests this might not be the final word. It could be reviewed down the line.
So wrapping things up then, it really sounds like this whole situation, foreigners, especially from China, using hotel addresses for Japanese licenses, it's a direct result of two things colliding. First, the huge difference in how many countries accept Japanese versus Chinese licenses.
The driving freedom aspect.
And second, this specific Japanese certificate of residence stay system, which sort of unintentionally provides the mechanism for short-term visitors to meet the address requirement.
That sums it up really well. It's legal, currently allowed, but definitely causing some unease about road safety and whether the system is being used as originally intended.
Yeah, and it makes you think, doesn't it, about the bigger picture?
Absolutely. What does this kind of situation tell us about, the patchwork of international regulations we have for things like driving? Is it sustainable?
Right, and How might things change if these worries about safety and fairness keep growing louder in Japan? Will they tighten the rules?
It's a watching brief, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. And it leaves you with a final thought, maybe. As the world gets smaller, travel gets easier, should we be pushing harder for more globally standardized driving license recognition?
Or is the reality just going to be these kind of local solutions and workarounds with all the quirks and controversies they inevitably bring?
Something to ponder. Definitely gives you food for thought.